Rogers TV Ottawa.
Well, welcome, Ottawa. Most of us probably imagined we'd be through this pandemic by now, but as you all know, COVID-19 had different plans for us. And throughout these difficult times, the city has had to continue making important decisions on our behalf. This show gives you an opportunity to connect with your elected officials and, of course, for them to connect with you. Welcome to Ward Updates 2022. This is a series of one-on-one interviews with Ottawa City councillors and, of course, our mayor. We're going to discuss some very important topics, important issues during these discussions, issues that, of course, affect you, your family, your neighbors, and other members of your community. My guest today is Matthew Luloff, City Councillor for Orléans Ward. Welcome to the show, Matt. And I'd like to start off, Councillor Luloff, just talking about how things have been with yourself and your family. You know, we're almost 2 years into this. How have you been coping?
Yeah, it's this has been a difficult 2 years, to be completely honest with you. Very difficult because my wife, Laura, and I have two young daughters. Libby, who's just a little over 2, and Madeline, who joined our family back in August. And so we've been severely limited in what we've been able to do, due to the restrictions, obviously, but our own personal concerns when it comes to having 2 children that are not eligible to be vaccinated. I know that there are a lot of young families out there right now that are struggling with that, and this is the age when you want to be visiting with grandma and you want to be meeting aunties and uncles and friends and whatnot. And I know that there are a lot of young families that share my concern that these early days that are so precious for our young ones, moving forward, I'm honestly, personally, I think that my daughters are going to think that I'm terribly unpopular and don't have any friends. Seriously, it's tough because they really benefit from those other relationships, right? We've been very lucky that Libby's in daycare with a friend of mine who's an early childhood educator, who I've known for years. We used to live together as roommates, and we went to high school together and worked as lifeguards at the Raphael Center. So I'm very, very lucky.
Wow, that's so nice. Yeah, no kidding.
So Libby's getting that interaction, with her incredible kids and with kids from 2 other families, with a kind of low ratio because Jen wants to make sure that she can stay open through this. So it's
right.
It's been good. It's been good in that sense. I'll be honest that partway through this pandemic, in the very beginning, obviously we were more in shock with the strength at which Public Health Ontario came in with some of the restrictions.
Right.
There's a bit of a honeymoon period because you're spending more time at home and you're spending more time with your family, and the 2 hours that I spent commuting or running around to see people during the day, I got to spend with my daughters. So that was a bit of a gift. But then you start to get past the first COVID Christmas when
right.
I was chatting with my buddies and my office staff saying this is not going to last into 2021. There's no way we'll get a handle on this. And then reality starts to set in. This is more of a long-term thing, and I'll be honest that it does affect your mental health, not being able to have
absolutely
those connections.
Yeah. Agreed, 100%. I mean, listen, Dr. Kieran Moore just came out and said we're going to have to learn to live with this. I think it's the first time that Dr. Moore has actually said those words. And, people have been saying, I've been saying it within, my circle of friends and family and community members that I've been speaking to for months now. I do the Rob Snow Show every Friday at 9:30. And Rob and I have discussed this together and saying, we're going to have to. And that's not to say we shouldn't be cautious, but, there comes a time when we have to realize that what's worse, right? These lockdowns Well, let's talk about that in your ward. First of all,
Sure.
let's
Yeah.
talk about how this pandemic has affected your role as a city councillor in Orléans ward. Has it made it more difficult to communicate with your constituents? So what are you hearing from the business community? Tell us what it's like.
Sure. It's been bittersweet when it comes to the business community in my ward. We've had no less than 24 new businesses open up their doors, whether that's food service or different services open up their doors during this pandemic. We've been proud to see so many people interested in opening up businesses in Orléans. However, there are such tight margins on things like indoor dining or takeout or restaurants. And while the community has come out very strongly in support of our local restaurants, our local entrepreneurs, some of them have had a lot of trouble adjusting, and because the margins are so tight, have closed their doors for good. The latest blow in my ward is the indefinite closure of St. Martha's Brasserie, which is an incredible French restaurant down on Central Boulevard. I know the owner very well, and it was very painful to hear that. I am hoping that this indefinite closure results in a reopening once we start to see some of these restrictions being lifted. And as we were talking about this, like the restrictions, like the opening and the closing and the opening, it forces our local businesses to have to shift their model every single time. That takes up a lot of time and energy, and has been very, very difficult. So I don't know if it's palatable moving forward to continue to deal with the pandemic the way that we have. And I was very pleased to hear Dr. Kieran Moore say that it's time to take a new approach, and that we learn to live with it. I think that providing people with the best and latest information possible in a very transparent manner, making rapid testing very accessible to people, and allowing adults to make decisions based on that information and their own level of risk tolerance is probably the best way forward. Because right now it's been local businesses, it's been sports and recreation, it's been local gyms. These are things that people often use to better their mental health, like going to the gym. Our physical health and our mental health are intertwined, right? And so it's
and Matthew, you mentioned the closure of that beautiful restaurant, and the other one, I think that sad news. You could maybe speak to this is the Orléans Y, right?
Yeah.
Also announcing that they're closing for perhaps different reasons, not necessarily related to COVID, but it's just another loss during a difficult time.
The Orléans Y is a place that really holds a special place in my heart, as some place that, I used to hang out at when I was a kid. We would skateboard in front, much to the, I think, chagrin of many of the users of the facility. But I used it to play basketball with my friends. We would go to the gym there, when I was training to be a lifeguard. It was a great spot. The day rates were very, very reasonable at the time, and they were all the way through this. It's a daycare facility. We've been using it for quite some time as our mass vaccination facility. Those two operations will continue in perpetuity, which is very, very good news for my community. But the YMCA has sold the property. And I don't have as much information as I wish that I did on what's planned for the property moving forward, but it's just one more facility. And oftentimes, my residents feel that Orléans is often left out of the conversation.
Right.
In the city.
Yeah, you've often said that, right? You've often said that your constituents feels left out, that the East End in general, feels left out. You did a study, if I remember correctly, the corridor secondary plan that in 2019. Maybe talk about a little bit, first of all, why your constituents are feeling left out of the conversation, and maybe some of the results of that study.
For sure. So the economic corridor study is ongoing, and there's still an opportunity for people to participate and have their say. In fact, we had a wildly successful and very innovative information session with the authors of this study. This is something that I did commission back in 2019, and it was to remedy some of the issues that I heard when I was knocking on doors in 2018, and some things that I've innately felt as an Orleans resident for nearly my entire life. People often say, like, why does Canada get everything? Why does Nepean get everything? And so when I came into office, I worked really hard to ensure that that wasn't the case. So we're going to be the first suburb, the first extension of the LRT line to open up. We had the first suburban, in partnership with the MOFOR, the first treatment center and assessment center for COVID-19 in the suburbs at the Rivière Center.
Right.
We had our own mass vaccination center. But let's talk a bit about this this corridor study. This is something that I spoke with Steve Willis about when I first came in. He's our GM of planning and economic development. Just a wonderfully hardworking gentleman. And I saw that with the official plan, that there were plans to roll out a new secondary plan for the Place d'Orléans area. And I felt that this was a really wasted opportunity if we were only going to focus on this one kind of central area, because I believe that Orleans deserves a main street, and a proper main street. And so what we looked at was, how do we maximize the economic development in the entirety of the eastern corridor of the LRT, so from Jeanne d'Arc Station all the way to Trim Road. This is a massive opportunity, and we've started to see some, residential and other businesses open up on Line 1. You can see that in Councillor Tierney's ward. And I wanted to make sure that we really maximize this to create more connectivity to the neighborhoods and within the stations, and expand that area to about 600 to 800 meters around each station. And that way it encompasses St. Joseph Boulevard, which should be our main street. Many people think of St. Boulevard as, where we've got the Paroisse Saint-Joseph, a lot of local small businesses dotted along it. But right now, no one lives on St. Joseph. And oftentimes, if you...
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you live adjacent to it, you have to walk the equivalent of, 5 downtown city blocks just to get to the local business that's behind you. So that connectivity is going to be so important. So what I envisioned was, people are saying... And the BIA did a study quite some time ago showing that, pre-pandemic, obviously, that 80% of Orleans' population crossed the Greenbelt into downtown every single day to go to work. So my question was, why can't we have jobs here? And not put all of our eggs in one basket. In the past, we've heard, we need a government department out here. Well, that's relying on someone else to create these sorts of jobs for us. Why can't we do it ourselves? Why can't we come into our own as a community in a way that respects the existing neighborhoods, and we keep that kind of bedroom feel in existing neighborhoods that have been there since the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, while really maximizing on the economic potential of this corridor? So my vision was, along St. Joseph, let's bring those strip malls into the 21st century. Let's move the businesses up to the sidewalk so that pedestrians can walk right in instead of having to cross over, 500, 600 meters of asphalt in the way of having, our parking lots kind of front facing. Nobody really wants to see that. This isn't the 60s anymore, where people are driving, really nice looking cars that, attract people to parking, right? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, these strip malls, yeah. And so my question for you then, Matthew, so how viable is it? Is the zoning available along St. Joseph Boulevard to put in residential, to put in these mixed residential units where you can have restaurant retail down below, you can have residential, units up above, and, maybe even adding, I don't know, single family homes along there. How viable is that?
So the vision then is to look at land that's being underutilized. So we can see something like Youville Drive becoming its own 15-minute neighborhood with, coffee shops, perhaps little restaurants, maybe a distillery or breweries or that sort of thing on the bottom level, maybe some entertainment space, that sort of thing, with rentals, and especially a portion of them being affordable rentals that are close to transit, and then along St. Joseph, this kind of village feel that respects the Franco-Ontarian culture and architecture of our downtown core. So you can see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-story residential on a podium of business along that street. Natural draw down to the street level, really street-oriented development. You'll see some change to some of the underutilized land around each station. So right now we've got these big cloverleaf intersections that can be changed to more of an urban design, like you've got at Parkdale, kind of an on and off. And that's, like 9 hectares of land that could be used to build affordable housing close to transit. On top of that, you've got the area around Trim Station, that is ripe for some redevelopment as well, perhaps the Taylor Creek Business Park. So there's 2 exercises that have to go on here. So, the official plan passes. The secondary plan is coming up for more public discussion in June, and then to council in Q3 2022. And throughout that time, there will be a zoning activity. So when we look at like land permissibility and what we're looking for, that zoning will obviously have to follow and come into place, and we can finally build an Orleans downtown that we can be proud of. Bring more jobs to Orleans, give people more spaces, get people that have built businesses throughout this pandemic a place of their own, a physical space of their own on our main street. I think it's going to be great for our community, great for our economy, and certainly creating those connections for cyclists, for pedestrians, and ensuring that our public transit is viable and serving the public and serving those businesses.
Let's talk about public transit. So how do you feel about the transportation options in your ward? And maybe not even, what are you hearing from your constituents? Can all residents affordably take transportation in the area? Is it reliable? Is it convenient? All of these things, incredibly important if we want it to work. If we want to encourage people to come back, do we need further incentives? Some people are looking at, the increase of 2.5% and saying, is that the best time? Is this the best time, to be increasing fares when we have got a lot of work to do? People have fallen into different habits. Some of those habits are great. Some of those habits, are bringing people back into their vehicles, and you get comfortable using your vehicle. And, so pandemic aside, we even have, these habits that we have to break. So do you see us, or I should say, would you recommend to City Council, listen, we have to figure out a way to provide more incentive for people to use public transportation?
Absolutely. I mean, this has been a struggle for me throughout this term. And we've been able to make different changes, like a new route that runs north-south to collect people in Convent Glen and Orleans Wood and bring them up to Innis, where much of the shopping is today. We'd like to see that change through the corridor study. And so we've been able to kind of do little tweaks and things to make public transit more viable in Orleans. But you're totally right. As a result of this pandemic, there are few people that either feel comfortable using public transit, and there are many people that need to use public transit. So we have to make sure that the routes that we have and the timings that we have are serving the habits of the people that live here. The major game changer is going to be when the LRT finally opens. I am very excited for this, to be able to hop on a local bus to take me to the closest station. You're looking at something like a 12-minute ride from most areas right down to the O train, and then 20 minutes, you're downtown. I don't want to sit in my car in traffic. I want to be able to do work, right? I want to be able to open up my email, do some work, listen to some music, and just coast in rather than having to directly. That's wasted time for me when I'm sitting in my car,
right?
Because I have to spend all of my time concentrating on driving when I could rely on public transit and get downtown very quickly. I think that
Are you encouraged, Matthew? Are you encouraged of what we've seen since November? We could talk about LRT and the failures of it,
Sure.
for hours on end. I think we've talked about it enough. As far as council is concerned, and as far as residents and media is concerned, we certainly have talked about its failures. We go back, in November, it's back up running. Are you encouraged by what you've seen so far? And what are you expecting to see from the inquiry? That's the other question, right? Any expectations of what may come out of that?
I am cautiously optimistic with what I've seen. RTM and RTG have a lot of work to do, and by extension, so do we, frankly, have a lot of work to do to earn back the trust of our public. We are going to see a heck of a lot more than just reliability in 45 centimeters of snow. That's
Right.
wonderful. It's good to see that the system functions properly, but we are going to need to see far more consistency out of RTM and RTG. So yes, I'm optimistic by what I've seen, but again, we still have to continue to hold RTM and RTG's feet to the fire. We can't let them slip up or rest on their laurels, which oftentimes happens, with anyone in their life. Things go really well for a while and then you kind of slip up. I don't want to see that. This is what the consistency that we've seen lately, with some very small exceptions, I believe is the consistency that we deserve and that we paid for. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
And that makes me think as well, when we think of light rail, the shortfalls in revenues, right? The pandemic has been a huge hit on city revenues, not just public transportation and the LRT. You're also looking at recreational programs and event sites, and right, there's just so much. And how do you make up for these revenue shortfalls? Some people have looked at that and happy with a 3% property tax hike, keeping it that low, but wondering if inevitably you're putting off a larger tax hike in 5, 7, 10 years down the road because we have to make up for these revenue shortfalls. Can we make up for them without raising taxes into that 5 to 10% range?
That's an excellent question. And we as citizens of Ottawa cannot afford that kind of a tax hike. For affordability, rental prices go up. So important that we continue to maintain low tax increases and no tax increases if it's possible. We're simply not at that point right now because of inflation and whatnot, and we're seeing inflation go up. But we cannot continue to raise taxes to a point where people cannot afford to either stay in their homes, purchase a home, or rent, because obviously somebody pays that property tax and that's going to be downloaded onto the tenant. So I believe that if we are fiscally responsible and continue to be fiscally responsible, and that means that you can't fund every little pet project that us sitting at the table want to see in the city. It's important that we are prudent. So, there are several different initiatives that were launched this term of council. I won't speak of the other ones, but I'll speak of the one that I launched, and that's the Ottawa Veterans Task Force. The Ottawa Veterans Task Force is something that serves our veterans by looking at our 3 pillars: health and well-being, obviously incredibly important, housing, and second career opportunities. This is run completely out of my office. It is not a budget line item on the city's website. Mm-hmm. You have to be innovative. If you want to make a difference and you have a particular constituency that you want to serve and pay special attention to, like I promised to do in 2018 by serving those who serve, we're going to recommend to council that we also look at first responders as well, especially in the area of mental health and well-being for the next term of council, if I'm lucky enough to be reelected and stand the task force up again. But you need to be innovative. We cannot continue to expand programming for some of these pet projects and add that to the tax roll. I believe that this office is about serving people, not serving myself or my pet projects. So it's going to be very important moving forward that we scrutinize any new program spending that people want to bring in. And so it's going to be very, very important looking at how efficiently we are spending that tax dollar. And we've been very lucky to have some help from different orders of government throughout this. I do think that it is sustainable, but we're going to need to make sure that we continue always to take a hard look at the programs and services that we're providing and ensure that we're meeting the needs of people without being terribly superfluous.
Matthew, just going back to your ward, what, if any, improvements or major issues affecting your ward that you wanted to see that haven't come into fruition? What stands out to you that you've heard from, members of your community saying we're frustrated because of this particular issue?
We've been really lucky over the course of this term of council. And much of, if not all of, the infrastructure projects and program that I looked to bring into the city over the course of this term, I've been able to achieve. I'm very proud of that, and I know that residents are very pleased with that. However, there are some things that are medium to long term that really need to be looked at. One of them is a proper pedestrian crossover of the 174. That's not properly funded right now, but we got $2 million in this year's budget for design and construction of the pillars. So we're going to need some partners to come on board with us. We want to make sure that happens, and I want to continue to make investments in our roads, in cycling infrastructure, in pedestrian infrastructure, because people are getting out more and more often, to get some fresh air. It's going to be so important that we continue to make those investments into the future.
About 90 seconds left, Matthew. I just want to touch on quickly before we run out of time. We've witnessed at times a very divided city council. We're going to have some new faces, of course. You have some people that have thrown their hat into the mayoral race. A new mayor's coming on board. What sort of leadership qualities are going to be necessary by city council and by the mayor to help bridge some of that divide?
We're going to have to show a willingness to work together, which is something that I've tried very, very hard to do over the course of this term. I've worked with councillors that perhaps, traditionally we may not see eye to eye on a lot of issues, but that I genuinely like as human beings. I'm very much in contact with, city councillors of all different political stripes. I try my best to be that bridge builder and to work together. That's the kind of leadership that we're going to need. We need to focus on city building and focus on the future and really, really listen during this election to the kind of city that our residents want. We're there for them. We're there to serve them. And we're expected to work together.
Matthew Luloff, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
It is very nice to see you, Derick, and it's so nice.
It's great to see you too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, that is Matthew Luloff, City Councillor for Orléans. Thanks so much. You've been watching another in our series of one-on-one interviews with city councillors in your Ward Updates 2022.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.